might have been kinder for some of you to be seated during it. I don't think lightning would strike. The words of the Samaritans at the end of the gospel. It is no longer because what you have said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this truly is the Savior of the world. We have heard for ourselves. I think most deeply rooted religious experience has to be of that sort. It has to be that which we have heard for ourselves, which we have taken in, which we have grafted into our souls and our thoughts and our being and our way of seeing the world. But this is really a rather startling proclamation from the Samaritans. Now, I think that we could say that the Jews and the Samaritans were sort of like the Red Sox and the Yankees. Maybe not that bad. Or perhaps like Roman Catholics and Protestants. Or perhaps like various sects of the Muslims that war with each other. So who were these Samaritans? They were believers in Moses. Who were the Jews? They were believers in Moses. Oh, they believed in God, but I mean that they revered Moses as really the seminal figure of their emancipation and of their redemption and of coming into their own as a people of God. The Samaritans and the Jews both revered Moses, but they were very, very different, weren't they? Were they? Maybe they were about as different as Roman Catholics and Protestants. Or perhaps, no, I couldn't go there. Red Sox again. No. My point is this. The attitudes that we develop to those whom we consider to be other so often stand in the way of our own growth as persons. We so often demonize that which we have identified as different, strange, weird, and oftentimes there is only a slight iota of difference that causes us to have that kind of an attitude. But you know, attitudes are wonderful in the way that they reinforce themselves, they build upon themselves, they become calcified, they become like cement in the spirit, because we are so wedded to our particular point of view. And that was the case between the Samaritans and the Jews. Now, imagine this. They considered each other so much at odds with one another that a Jew needing to travel from Jerusalem to Galilee would not go directly. Why? Because they had to go through Samaria. It would be like us trying to get to St. Albans. And we all know none of us want to go through Colchester. Proving my point. And so we're going to avoid going through Colchester. Let's go through, Richmond. And then through Underhill. And we'll circle around. And that is just about like what Jews did in order to avoid going from Jerusalem to Galilee. They would avoid Samaria by going east across the Jordan River, up the east side of the Jordan, and then cut back over into Galilee. Now, Isn't that an attitude? You don't even want to go through the land of these people. It wasn't necessarily that the Samaritans were going to attack them, though there were testy times. But it was this feeling of, we are the Jews. They are the Samaritans. We know about that. They worship at a different mountain. They do not worship in Jerusalem. They're not high church enough. We are more holy. They may think they're holy, but we're holy. Well, isn't it interesting what Jesus does once again? Surprises us by taking a beeline directly from Jerusalem right through Samaria on the way to the Galilee. Now, I can imagine that the disciples were going, oh my, whoa. Just stick together, guys, and don't look. Whoa. I hope we don't meet anybody. So they've been walking for the whole morning, and by this time, in the heat of the day, they're probably pretty tired, and they're getting hungry. And so somehow the disciples decide they'll go off and leave Jesus, probably to rest and pray, so that they will go into the town to get some food and then bring it back. So while they're gone, Jesus encounters the Samaritan woman. And then we know the story as was read at great length this morning. And the story involves an encounter between a man and a woman who are not married to one another and who are unchaperoned. That would have been a big no-no in that culture, and still is today in the Middle East. In many cultures in the Middle East today, an unaccompanied woman meeting a man, however innocently, would be considered to be, well, we won't need to think of it as bad name. But here is Jesus with the Samaritan woman, and to compound it, it's not just a man and a woman, it's a Jew and a Samaritan. Whoa, a Samaritan! Whoa! Now you can imagine what the disciples thought when they returned. Their mouths must have hung open. What is he up to now? We called him master, but what a fruitcake he is. This is ridiculous. And so, once again, Jesus has cut right through the solid stone of their attitude. First of all, they go directly through Samaria, and now he is talking with a Samaritan woman, and worst of all, she is a woman of some repute. Do you know why she might have been coming at noontime instead of when most people gather water in the early morning? Well, if you had been out all night carousing, when would you finally get up and get to the well? So she arrived, I know none of you do that, but she arrived at the well at noontime, the height of the heat of the day. And so we can deduce from that even further evidence that she was not the sort of even the normal Samaritan. She was a few pegs down from the average Samaritan. And yet Jesus is still dealing with her directly. And they have this exchange, and we hear about the living water versus the water. But Jesus asked the woman to draw some water for him and to give him a drink of water. Now, you know about the kosher laws and the avoidance of sharing of utensils and the specific dietary laws. And this would be a very great deviation. Once again, another detour from protocol and from attitude. The disciples come back. Jesus then is able to instruct them as to what is going on. The woman goes into town. Now you can imagine this would be a sensational event of this scarlet woman going into town and proclaiming that she had met this man and her life was changed. Phenomenal. What a departure from the expected. Now, I would also today have us think about our scenarios. We all have some areas that are a problem, but think of your Samaria, the one area perhaps in your life where you have a calcified attitude and which is keeping you from crossing over to a new place where you might actually encounter a sense of the living water. You know, sometimes, like the Samaritans and the Jews, when we're close enough, we have more problems with one another. Christians, Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Northern Ireland. Sometimes members of a family are more rancorous toward one another than would be total strangers. So sometimes that kind of closeness is exactly a problem for us. And there are some times when the Samaria that we will not venture through is to reconcile with somebody that we have so made the other, so decided is beyond hope or redemption, but mostly beyond our forgiveness, that we will not go there. And yet, once in a while, we will encounter somebody by accident in a moment of serendipity that we had thought was very other. And years later, we realize that they are our best friends. So where is the Samaria in your life? Where do you not wish to go? It might be the very place where the well of living water resides.